So we'll start with Mr. Monroe and then Ms. Dew and on down. So starting with the subject of public safety. Over the years, Vallejo has seen quite a few fluctuations in crime rates. This past summer, we've seen an increase in homicides in the city, and just last week, a person was killed at a sideshow. What strategies would you employ to reduce crime and improve safety in our communities?
Thank you. So as a public servant and as the Chief Advisory Board member, I get the privilege and honor to sit down with the Chief of Police on a monthly basis with a group of community members. And in that meeting, we get to emphasize what the community members are relaying to us, whether it's burglary, sideshows, whatever it may be. We get to relay that information back to the Chief of Police. Now, with that duty and obligation, I do take it very seriously because it's a very rare moment to actually get a chance to build a relationship and gain trust with the police department and try to change this culture of what's going on here in the city. So one of the best ways that I can successfully alleviate and promote crime prevention and things such of that nature is really getting this information back out to the community as fast as possible and as transparent as possible, and then also holding our police and our law enforcement agencies accountable, not just being nice to them because we're on the board, but because we're actually citizens that care about our safety and health as well. So in that opportunity, we get to press the issue, and of course, as mayor, I will not be granted that privilege anymore, but I will obviously have a much better relationship with the Chief of Police in ensuring that we can enhance public safety efforts via federal grants, making sure that we actually get stuff getting stuff back to the dais that council members and the mayor can vote on that are actually moving the city forward. And not just saying change, but we need to focus on improving things. We need to really focus on looking at specific plans and figuring out how we can execute the plan. Sorry for looking at that gentleman too much. I'm zoned in on the question. But the main thing is we really need to focus on a specific plan to make sure that we're, first off, building the police station and making sure that all council members and the mayor is on board so we can move forward and move this train fast as possible. Because I've been sitting and listening to council meetings since 2018. We've been talking about this police station since 2018. So there are leaders that have been in power for that long, and we still haven't got any movement on that. So we really need to make sure we're electing new, fresh ideas. Thank you.
Ms. Dew?
Thank you for the question. Yes, public safety is a top priority. Many residents are concerned about the level of crime, and they're concerned about the relationship between law enforcement and the community. We have to increase our staffing. Currently, so for example, when I first came in on council, it was a very similar situation. We only had 76 officers, we had a lot of crime, and we were struggling to respond to calls for service appropriately. And we had to be very focused and diligent with our priorities and our budget to make sure that we got to a point where we have 137 authorized positions and in 2019 filled positions. And we were able to respond to calls for service more appropriately. We then also started realizing how incredibly important it was to begin doing reform work also. So we created the Police Oversight Commission, which has just been appointed and sworn in, and also began involving the community in the hiring process to make sure that the officers we're hiring have the same core values that we do as a community. Currently we have, I think, I heard tonight or this morning, 69 officers, sworn officers, and 37 responding to calls for service on patrol regularly. We have almost 400 calls for service per day, so there's obviously not enough. So we have to do everything we can in the short term to support staffing, working with the Solano County Sheriff, working with the CHP, and also I understand the council should be looking at, or will be looking at a retention and recruitment program, giving bonuses to the current officers that refer new officers in that are coming from other departments, which helps increase staffing faster, because brand new hires that are just entering into the industry, it takes almost 2 years for them before they, from application to being out on the streets and serving our community. We also...
Thank you. On the important question of public safety, which is on everybody's mind, right? I've been thinking about it. I live next door to City Park. Heard gunshots and drug sales in the first few years. To serving, being appointed under 2 police chiefs to serve in the police advisory board and work with our current Vice Mayor Mina Diaz, and 2 or 3 of us asking some tough questions about all the promises made, all the grand transparency and statements on their website or literature, but basic trust and transparency. When a past mayor was a good friend of ours, still is, who was also serving on the police force himself, was not able to acknowledge a badge-bending truth. And he blew up the truth, in terms of gaining the confidence of the people. I also know several sergeants and 1 or 2 captains who served in the community and conversated with all of us often at various events. And in knowing them personally and knowing some of the undisclosed issues or unsaid, what's not reading between lines part of the deal, how the truth was changed before and after an incident or a couple of years or under a different administration, I felt quite disillusioned, like a lot of you. But I appreciate the police and the work they do, the risky work they do, and how dedicated they are. But I feel like a lot of the public that many of them have been milking the system, so to speak, and really draining our budgets. And lately, in the last 5 to 10 years, the number of lawsuits that have started to really pile up. And so my point being, I may not have offered any specific solution to this problem, but I think that internally they need to be presented to the public and the council as expert lawmakers and protectors, and seek the opinion of the police advisory board and the citizen, and build that relationship first. Lastly, there is also that element of not serving well enough, and the same excuse for years and years of not having enough money, not having enough staff, has become a broken record, and we got to do better than that. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so most of you know I've been a vocal advocate for police reform and accountability since I've been involved in Vallejo, and we've gotten to the point where reform is not optional. The crisis that we are facing now with police understaffing and response times is a direct result of the reputation of the department and the lack of accountability in the past. The California Department of Justice had to step in and sue the city of Vallejo to compel reform because our past leaders did not do what it took, and we are now paying the price. The thing that bothers me the most is the lack of trust in the community because of the misconduct, but also the lack of trust in public perception of whether or not, if something happens to them, if they're a victim of crime, someone will show up. And that, to me, is unacceptable. That should be our top priority, that our residents feel safe, our taxpayers feel safe in the community, that when they call the police, someone is gonna come and help them and that they can trust. So reform, I will continue to be a steadfast advocate of reform. We need to partner and do this in good faith. That is how we will staff up with good officers, restore reputation, implement community policing, and really do the hard work to rebuild trust in the community. I also have a couple of short-term strategies that I'm going to be deploying because we need to address this now for our residents and for our small businesses that are suffering. So I'm going to call the governor's office on day 1 and ask for patrol down Sonoma Boulevard of the California Highway Patrol. The DOJ is suing us. They know we have a problem. We need state assistance on Sonoma Boulevard. The second thing I'm going to do is something that Mayor Elihu Harris did in Oakland in the late 90s, which is convene an interagency task force of law enforcement agencies of all levels out of the mayor's office of Vallejo. The FBI, the state, the sheriff, Cal Maritime, Solano College, VPD, and create a task force to address crime, gun violence, human trafficking, and to make sure that we have response time so that people can trust that they'll get a response from law enforcement when they call. And then the final plan that I have is I think we need to implement a neighborhood service coordinator community service program where we have neighborhood representatives that can be liaisons to the city and track progress on critical safety issues facing their communities.
Thank you very much. So, many of you have mentioned this in the context of the last question, so I'd like to go straight to the issue of police reform as part of public safety. I could start with Ms. Dew. So, Vallejo has had its share of issues with policing and community trust. So knowing the need for a strong chief going forward, what specific reforms would you advocate for to improve police-community relations?
Yeah, so, when I was on council, we began to learn how complicated the whole issue is. For example, there was no decertification process for officers. And when I was chair of the Public Safety Policy Committee for the League of California Cities, we championed that legislation to move forward, and it exists today. And we had Cal Chiefs on board as well. We have to, so I mentioned earlier involving the community in the hiring process, and I mentioned the Police Oversight Commission. I'd like to see the Police Oversight Commission also be involved in that hiring process so that they are looking at the candidates that are coming in and saying, okay, when incidents happen later on, is it because we chose the wrong person? Or is it because we did not provide the support and education and training so that they could respond appropriately, or the proper working conditions? Are they working 16-hour mandatory overtime shifts repetitively that is causing them to be tired and make poor choices? Also bringing back the Police Explorer program so that we are getting into our middle schools and our high schools, inspiring our youth to look at those jobs for themselves because they are great paying jobs. And if we have that homegrown workforce that is passionate and comes from our own community, represents our community, has respect of the community and a love for the community they serve, that's how you have a department that not only are we proud of, but they're proud to work here too.
Thank you. Not claiming any expertise in this matter, but just speaking as a member of the public, taxpayer, and generally expecting our leaders to step up to the game, tapping all the resources, state, county, and local level, and seek the help of, do extra above and beyond sometimes to go and seek the sheriff's office or the retired police officers or some of the trained folks to address some of the basic issues, basic routine police matters, so that the actual trained police can be involved in other serious matters. I would also recommend mandatory drug testing for officers who are involved in an active shooting or an active crime scene. They should not be given any due difference of preference per se in terms of what they had, and not giving any opportunity to subvert any information. In terms of like shredded documents in the case of a legal case, or I can think of stopped and started police videos during an incident. Things of that nature. I would also say that the active number of interim chiefs and interim police chiefs and the changes we all went through in the last 2 years, it really disturbed the amount of internal trust between the officers and the chief, and then the chief and the police department as such with the public. So there's a lot of work to be done, and I think collectively a unified council with the mayor's leadership and honestly seeking the help, because they are not the experts in everything. That's what I think of right now. Thank you.
So I believe at this point in time, the biggest impediment to police reform in Vallejo is above the pay grade of the police department. It's the city attorney's office. And the first thing that we need to do is we need to make sure that we hire a reform chief and we have a mayor, a city council, a city manager, and a city attorney that are all on the same page and supporting that chief to do whatever it takes to reform the department and rebuild the department. And that has not occurred, and no one has addressed it. So that would be the first step. My colleague mentioned drug testing. That we have known that there's been a problem in the Vallejo Police Department now for over a decade. There were 6 deaths in 2012, and the city councils at the time not only did nothing to reform the department, they removed drug testing from the union contract. So when there is an act of force in Vallejo or a shooting, we are not allowed to drug test that officer, which it makes no sense to any of us. I'm seeing heads shaking. We need a discipline matrix so that there's objective standards for how officers are disciplined when they violate policy. We need to implement community policing. That's no longer optional. That's part of the Department of Justice requirements. So implementing the community policing, the neighborhood service coordinators that I mentioned earlier to liaise with the police and help rebuild trust, and also flag issues of misconduct and issues of mistrust. The decertification law might provide some benefit from Vallejo, but it relies on the departments themselves to report officers for decertification. And I don't know yet of a single Vallejo police officer that has been referred to the state for decertification. So that's the first step. And that, again, some of that's not our police department. Some of that's our city manager and our city attorney's departments. So there needs to be some accountability on the part of city council in their management of the city manager and the city attorney to ensure that these things are being followed through on. And then finally, we need to have more transparent, open communication. I have been following city council meetings now for upwards of 5 years, and I have yet to see a single person from the dais be honest about the situation that we're in with the need for police reform. No one has taken those necessary steps, and we need to have more transparency.
Thank you for the question, and if I can remember, it was regarding police reforms and how we can help advocate for those things. So as a chief advisory board member, as I mentioned, we get to sit down and we actually get a monthly update regarding the police reform efforts and the stipulated judgment, things of that nature. So with that information, we have learned as a board that there are steps being taken, and we as a community, we are seeing them. The efforts that the community, the BPD is showing as far as transparency and having town halls and trying to really get in front of the public more and gain a better relationship, these are all part of the police reform efforts. And they have to go through these growing pains for us to eventually, get into a comfortable state. So police reforms are here, they're underway right now. One thing that I want to speak about, we're talking about assistance from other agencies. The Sheriff Department, we've been in contact with the Sheriff Department for roughly about a year, trying to work out a contract for $9 million so we can get 12 months of assistance. That's how hard it is to actually negotiate and get something done in this city. Chief Todd is doing his best. I can honestly believe that Chief Todd is doing his best to get these sheriff efforts here to the city. We got Vice Mayor Lorea Diaz, who actually vocally called out the county and state officials, and that actually got the ball rolling. So things like that, council members and mayors, we need to be more vocal. When have you ever seen our mayor, our current mayor, actually get out in front of the news and willingly say, we really need help on behalf of us as the residents? We need a mayor like that. We need somebody who's going to step out there, take the heat, whatever it might be. Somebody has to say it, and we need leadership to do it. Humbly thank Ms. Lorea Diaz for getting the ball rolling, because when she shouted them out, they responded. And we need that type of effort and energy at the dais every single day to make sure that these police reform efforts are actually going to move forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, starting with Mr. Shankar this time, and related to the subject of reform, but this time in terms of government transparency. So, what measures would you implement to increase transparency and accountability in Vallejo's local government?
Thank you. After all the years of listening to council members and mayors speak and the attorney and the city manager talk about issues. I would take a complete 180 kind of approach and simply say that if there are any non-complaints or the non-complaints of the oath of office or the fiduciary duty of any one of these folks, the first thing they may have to do is to just have a accountability in terms of the fiscal responsibility part, meaning if there are 15 to 25 lawsuits in the last year or two or three, and then the city attorney or the city manager collectively continue to get $300,000, $400,000 and not being held accountable, that doesn't work. In a private company, in a private corporation, as an accountant or office worker, if I screwed up some annual reports and didn't represent or failed in my goals, I would be held accountable. I would lose my job. So some sort of a similar in principle, but not exactly same kind of a disciplinary action need to be considered. And can you repeat your question one more time, please?
Sure, it's about government transparency. So what measures would you implement to increase transparency and accountability?
I asked this specifically because the word transparency is so loosely used all over the website, everywhere, and they always talk about accountability and transparency, but when it comes to something every day, they don't mention it. If there is a fund transfer of huge amounts of money from the general fund to something specific that they should not have touched, and it just gets overridden, and all the council members do not seem to question, along with the mayor, the person responsible for, and hold them accountable because they need to tell the public. That is one example. I can think of a few others, but right now, that's all for now.
So I think a lot of the issues, if not all the issues we're dealing with in Vallejo, are a consequence of a lack of transparency and a lack of accountability. And it feels like a lot of our leaders have spent more time covering up misconduct than doing the hard work to solve the problems that we face. So the first thing that I'll do is I want to end the excuses. I'm not going to tolerate excuses, and I'm going to lead from the top, and I'm going to take shared responsibility for all of the problems that we are facing and bring folks in and invite folks in to be a part of solving those problems. We need follow through. We hear a lot of empty promises and lip service to causes. We hear that we're going to get updates on something, and it never happens. That's a big reason why I decided to run for mayor instead of city council, because the mayor gets to manage the council agendas and ensure that when there's supposed to be an update within 30 or 60 days, that gets agendized and that update happens. And if repeatedly we're not following through and delivering on things that were promised, then someone's going to get held accountable and we're going to make a change. So it's that agenda management. It's also, for the transparency purposes, it's communication out of the mayor's office. So I want to revive the mayor's message. I went on OSCAT this morning. I want to go on OSCAT regularly as mayor. I want to have town halls. I want to be out in the community talking to people, because our elected officials should be accountable to the public. And I think they've been thus far accountable to their donors and their friends and their special interests. And we need accountability to the public. We need leaders who are not afraid to face their constituents, who are not avoiding and excluding their constituents, but who are inviting their constituents in and meeting them where they are to hear their concerns. And one example I'll give just in these last few seconds is that I've been part of the Surveillance Advisory Board, a new commission in Vallejo that I now chair, that was formed in 2022 with the explicit goal of increasing transparency in how our police department uses surveillance technology. It's still ongoing work, but it's so important that we do that work to rebuild trust in the community.
Thank you for the question again regarding transparency and accountability within the government. So the way I see that all panning out is literally just being more approachable. We got politicians that they don't seem human, quite honestly. You can't just walk up to them. You can't just shake their hand. Well, actually, you can, a few of them, quite honestly. But that's the newer generation of members that I've seen in the past few years. Council members are listening to the community. The mayor, I'm hoping the next mayor, myself, I am going to listen to the community. You will always know, and if you ask any commissioners or board members that sit on any board or commission with me, I ask the tough questions. I'm sitting in there really demanding answers what an ordinary Vallejoan would ask. Maybe not the most educated or the most distinguished of Vallejoans, but I'm talking about your everyday Vallejoans, your boots on the ground Vallejoans, your working Vallejoans, your seniors. So getting back to transparency and accountability, it just comes to just being a human, just being a person, just being approachable, being nice to people, just being kind. And I feel that customer service is really one of the ways that we can deliver on that. We need a better customer service attitude here in this city. Even our approach to walking into City Hall right now is, not light. We got to go downstairs now. It's just a lot that's going on throughout the trauma that's happened in the city. But getting back to that, one thing that I just learned about was actually I've seen this, but I actually seen it in person now, the CURB. So this is the Critical Incident Report Board. I believe that's the correct name, but that is the name for a police chief advisory board, essentially, where they go over critical incidents they may occur. So I think that's one way, and this is a public document, that is one way that we can increase transparency and accountability here in the city, is actually seeing who's reporting and who's reviewing these documents and seeing what's actually the result of these investigations. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. So while I was on the board of directors for the League of California Cities, we did annual goal setting, and it was with not just the board of directors, but with the policy committee chairs and vice chairs, as well as the regional presidents and vice presidents. And we would come up with a comprehensive and finite number of goals that we are going to work on, no more than 3 or 4 overarching priorities. When you have too many, nothing gets done. So we need to go back to that kind of goal setting where we have 2 days that are intensive and involving our commission chairs and vice chairs and leaders from our community coming up with a finite and attainable set of goals that we then work on from there going forward. We should have, and the reason it's so important to involve all of those leaders from the commissions and from the community is because they're the ones that are also going to be doing the work product. And we need to have those leaders from the community and our own departments reporting quarterly on the work progress of those goals. Then also budget hearings. We used to have budget hearings that would be 3 days long, listening to every single department, what they're doing well, what they need help with, the funding that they're using and the funding they need. And then we would prioritize that based upon our goals and making sure that we were spending our money according to what was most important to our community. And we got away from that during COVID, and we need to get back to that. Also, we also used to have Dan Key when he was our city manager. He was a great city manager, and he ran the organization based on performance-based evaluation. So every single individual in the organization was evaluated every year based on their performance, and their performance was evaluated based upon the goals that the community and the city council had set. And we did really well by doing that. We need to get back to doing that as well. That also went away with the next city manager.
Thank you, Ms. Sorce.
Thank you.
Let's do, sorry. So actually, next question to Ms. Sorce. So this is more of a broader question concerning budget priorities. And given the financial difficulties that Vallejo has had in the past, the question is, how would you prioritize the city's budget going forward to ensure fiscal responsibility while at the same time addressing critical needs like public safety, infrastructure, and social services?
Yeah, I think there has been a complete lack of transparency and oversight over the budget for many years now, and I am calling for a forensic audit of our finances for the past 5 years. The state controller's office does this for free. We cannot make responsible decisions without knowing the fiscal situation that we're in, and I think for too long the city has operated the general fund like a slush fund. We were asked to raise our own taxes a couple years ago, and there's still not been a tightening of the rest of the general fund to really check and see whether that is reflective of our priorities. So that's the first step, and we've got to start the budget process earlier in the year. the city managers of the past have, the most recent ones, have put it through in May about a year before it's due so that city council can't have any input. And the mayor and council, they need to demand, they're in charge, they need to demand that come out no later than March so that there's public input into the process so that we can ensure that we are directing our limited resources to address community priorities. We've got to trim waste, no bid contracts. We've got to stop approving projects that have funding gaps. That's really wasted a lot of money with some of these housing projects. And then I'm going to work with our county, state, and federal officials to bring resources to Vallejo to address our problems because, I'm sick of excuses and I think we need to start putting our tax dollars to work for us, but we also do need to bring in more resources. And so I'm excited about the leadership of Cassandra James on the Board of Supervisors. I'm excited for Chris Cabaldon at the Senate level and Congressman Garamendi. I'm excited to work with them to identify ways in which we can bring resources here to address public safety, housing and homelessness, and our infrastructure needs, because we are going to have to fund a new police station, some alternative to our police station. So we need to get to work doing that. And the first step is, I don't think we can make any of those decisions without a full audit so that we know where our budgeted money is going. Because I don't know, and that scares me.
Same question?
Same question.
Thank you.
Yeah, let's start with Mr. Monroe. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the question regarding budget priorities. So my number one priority, of course, is public safety. So if you look back at former Councilwoman Dew mentioned the goal-setting process. If you've looked at that in the past few years, you know that they've been aiming to make economic development the number one goal and priority of the city of Vallejo. So what I've been asking myself and residents as I'm knocking on doors is, do you see a reflection of that? And most of the answers are no, quite honestly. But the main thing that we need to start focusing on, my number one priority, is making sure that we really start focusing on public safety efforts. We really have to stop thinking about 4, 5, 6, 7 different options of how we're going to improve the city or change the city. We need to focus on one domino at a time, and that first domino is public safety. Once we start knocking that public safety domino down, then we'll get access to better education, better developers, more resources coming to our city, more help from outside agencies that actually don't feel like their life is on the line when they're being asked to help BPD to come help and just do their job. We really got to start focusing on prioritizing spending money directly on efforts that BPD is asking for. It's been a long time. Obviously, they've destroyed a lot of trust, but they are building the community back and trying to restore this trust. They're bringing in a lot of younger officers, which is, an issue within itself, but with the new law that the sheriffs just advocated for, now we're going to have retired sheriffs be able to come back and work part-time. So they're trying to create solutions so we can actually have options. So what I'm telling people on the campaign trails is safe cities invest in safety. These other cities aren't safe for no reason. You're not going to Walnut Creek, you're not going to Concord, you're not going to Danville and just walking around just because. Everybody has crime in the Bay Area. Everybody has crime in Northern California. But certain cities are investing more, and we got to be one of those cities that do it. Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you. All right. So to tackle the issues in Vallejo, despite budget constraints, a strategic approach is essential. Public-private partnerships, such as what we had with the Costco project and Lewis Group and PG&E, can share the costs. They can speed up the projects, although Safeway sued on that one. That slowed us down significantly. But we did get past it, and thank goodness we're in groundbreaking and construction today. Smart use of federal and state grants maximizes funding, investing in energy-efficient upgrades like the automatic water readers. Preventative maintenance reduces our long-term expenses. Participatory budgeting, local bonds, revenue diversification through tourism and economic development can provide ongoing funds. By balancing immediate needs with long-term strategies, Vallejo can effectively manage infrastructure challenges. One of the ideas that I have and have been promoting for several years, and Cabalden actually did this in West Sacramento, so we've had conversations about doing it here. An enhanced infrastructure financing district that allows us to put a cap on our property taxes, and the incremental increases in revenues get set aside into a fund that allows us to leverage that capital to be the catalyst for the development that we want to see happen on the waterfront and in the downtown. I also had the opportunity to tour San Antonio and what they did with their downtown. They did a housing first model where if you did at least 2 housing units above ground and commercial retail on the ground floor, they would waive permit fees, waive connection fees, rebate property taxes. They did that for 10 years and they had from 0 housing units to 10,000 housing units and 2 office towers in construction. And we don't need to go that big. So we don't have to do a strategy like that for that long. We can make it shorter and we can make it with a stick on the back end that you don't just get those rebates and those fee waivers and hold on to your property and you benefit personally. You have to execute those permits and do the development or else you will pay those fees within 3 years. By doing that, we will see a spur in economic activity. That's how you grow your general fund revenues. That's how you create more housing for all of our people. Housing that's attainable at every income level. Jobs that are available to all of our residents locally. By doing this, we can have a vibrant, thriving Vallejo. Thank you.
Lots of similar concerns and solutions, and I applaud Pippin Dew's experience of being in the League of Cities and as a only person on the dais with council member experience. But I also want to thank you, Andrea, for bringing up the audit issue. 2 or 3 of the nonprofits that I still serve, continue to have this basic issue, not having an internal audit system, at least once in 10 years, and an outside audit. And they expect everything to go well. And the treasurer's report, just like the city budget, get passed on, and very few really look through it, scan through it, and bring ways where they can cut costs or use better monies for better priorities. On that, I'm going to say a couple of general things, like reducing lawsuits is one thing that occurred to my brain in the last 2-3 years, more than a lot of things that I have seen in the city. When I hear the $15 to $18 million and several lawsuits in the pipeline, it just really concerns me. And what are all these 6 folks sitting and representing us on the mayor doing without questioning and asking them seriously, periodically, and reporting back to the people? I can think of reducing waste and duplication at very little, simple levels. Coming from family practice, when we don't have enough income or we have budget cuts, what do? We look at ways to cut costs and stretch the money and spend it later and avoid luxuries and do what it takes to manage the whole thing. And it's more complicated to do that in a large city with the $300 million budgets, like in Vallejo, but it's not impossible. I think that fiduciary responsibility lies with every council member and activists, and as several boards and commission members, they need to just ask that accountability from the elected officials and hold the mayor accountable. I can think of...
Thank you. So, this question to Mr. Monroe. Good, thank you. So, one subject that I didn't hear in the list of priorities, but that I know is at the heart of a number of people's issues in Vallejo is health disparities, environmental justice. So North and South Vallejo are known by the state as well as local authorities to have some of the highest asthma rates in the state. What would you do to address the environmental health and justice concerns in Vallejo and deal with those inequities?
Thank you for that question. That's actually a very great question, and I like to think to myself as a person who is true. And when you don't know an answer to something, you need to make sure that you can connect with the subject matter experts and figure out the best way and find the correct solution that represents your city. But the main thing that, as you mentioned that question, as I was recently walking around Mare Island, I noticed just how clean it was. compared to just over the bridge. And in my opinion, it takes a collective effort from not only the nonprofits, the community, the public officials, the state officials, the county officials. It's a community thing, is what I see when I'm walking around. Certain communities seem to care more. And it's not that Glen Cove or Mare Island is just randomly cleaner than the rest of Vallejo. These are community members that come together and make sure that their community is clean. They make sure that they're prohibiting blight or activity that might, gain more traction. Obviously there's a little bit of an unhoused community growing in the area now, is what I've heard, and people are concerned. But getting back to that specific question, I definitely see a lot of issues, especially in this area where we have a large concentration of housing projects. You have just this kind of inequity of, favorable resources. Quite honestly, it seems like as far as cleanliness, that's what I'm really noticing, is the cleanliness, because it really correlates directly to kind of like your neighborhood vibe and the aura that your area brings to the community. If it's clean, usually you get a much better sense of community, engagement, information. When you see, the broken window theory. When you see a broken window, it doesn't do anything to activate the community or to get people engaged. So we got to make sure we cleaning up as well and doing everything that we can to affect the environment. And then also getting back to just being honest with ourselves. If we don't know the answer, reach out to great members. I see Mr. Joe Feller right here. Great members of the Sierra Club. All these different environmental groups that can give us the right answers, or at least put us on the right track, so that we just not out here and misinforming the community. Thank you.
So being on the board of directors for the San Francisco Bay Ferry, we are tasked with going to a zero emission system. And thank you to the voters for voting for Regional Measure 3, because that has given us significant funding to increase our services. And the reason that we are increasing our services is for disadvantaged communities like ours, where we have Highway 80, which has 280,000 vehicles every day going back and forth right through the middle of our community, spouting emissions and pollution into our residents' neighborhoods. Highway 37, Highway 29, 780, these all connect us all over the Bay Area, which is great for business attraction, but not great for our community's health and the environment. So we are looking at increasing pilot service from Vallejo to Larkspur, for example, to help reduce traffic off of Highway 37, from Vallejo to Oakland to reduce traffic off of Highway 80. And also, while we are looking at going to a zero emission system, for example, the shipbuilding industry for these new vessels doesn't exist in the Bay Area, almost doesn't exist in the state. So a lot of those dollars right now are getting shipped out of state. And it is important, and in fact we had a board meeting earlier this month in August to look at how we can grow that industry locally, so that we are deploying that $120 million into new industries here locally, creating new jobs for our residents. And in fact, we've started, we have a waterfront training program that is going to be launching in the next month, called the Working Waterfront Coalition, training people right here in Vallejo to the maritime industry. And it's a 2-year program, 10-week training program that is going to be happening every 10 weeks for the next 2 years, rotating between Vallejo. I was able to successfully get it started here in Vallejo, and then going to Alameda next and coming back and forth. So working to grow that industry, the clean tech, green maritime, shipbuilding industry, is incredibly important for us and for the future of transportation. And I'm also looking at, is it time?
That's time.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. I can think of several small changes that we could make on top of what we already have. The one that comes to my mind at the top is something like the integration or the collaboration of all the long-term plans. We talk about a downtown development plan, a waterfront development plan, a Sonoma Boulevard 2030 plan, and the Mare Island 2050 long-term plan. And the city itself has a short-term and a long-term plan. So there has to be some sort of a collaborative component of the environmental aspect of it. If not, each entity spends more time and a lot more money at different times, and it doesn't all seem to come together. I can think of additional ferry system development and improvements to the Highway 37 that definitely needs the county and the state's help instead of waiting for another 20 or 30 years. I can think of education part with the Mare Island development, that they could incorporate the Mare Island Preserve, a sort of a project in several other areas. And also, if we have the housing, the low-income housing like we have down the street from my house on Sacramento Street in all the 6 districts, including the Glencoe or on Mare Island and Hidden Brooks, they will bring some equity in the populations that feel the trust and the resources shared by the city. That's all I can think of right now. Thank you.
Thank you. You stated it in the question that this is something that affects all of us, but it's also a racial and social justice issue, and we've seen throughout the country that often when the United States built its highway system, it went through low-income communities and communities of color, and we see that in Vallejo, with Highway 37 going through North Vallejo and 80 going through South Vallejo. And I think we have a responsibility to first stop doing harm, stop the damage, and then start being proactive in making sure that everything we do in the future not only goes through CEQA, not only goes through environmental review, but goes through that justice lens to make sure that we're not exacerbating the inequities that already exist in our community. And I'll give an example that many of the folks in this room spent years fighting the cement plant in South Vallejo that would have impacted our low-income community and our folks in South Vallejo. There is still a developer on that land. Now those principals have been convicted. They're convicted felons of bribing public officials in San Francisco. They're still operating heavy machinery on that property in South Vallejo without a permit, and we don't know what environmental damage that's doing to the residents down there. There are a couple other examples of folks operating heavy machinery in Vallejo without permits. And this is just, again, it's that special interest getting special treatment, and it's a need for accountability. So we've got to stop the damage. We've got to look at that Sperry Mills site, where Orsom thankfully isn't, and think about what we can do there that will uplift that community. We've got to think about the fairgrounds and how that's going to impact North Vallejo, and how that project can uplift the community and provide them open space. And then I think we need to look at our relationship with the county and make sure that when critical issues like fires and refinery accidents nearby happen, that we have an alert system to get out to our residents, so that, you know, we're already dealing with these disproportionate rates of asthma. People need to know immediately if there's an issue with air quality. So we need to have a stronger partnership with those alerts. And I know I'm running out of time. I was going to mention mixed use development as well. I think we need to think about how we're building up so that residents can shop where they live and we can reduce the need for vehicle traffic.
Thank you. Perfect. So we'll start with this two on this one. So I heard a number of mentions of homelessness and housing issues, so I wanted to skip to that. 40% of Vallejo's residents are renters, and Solano County has some of the highest eviction rates in the Bay Area. So there are a number of proposed tenant protections coming up. Rent control, just cause evictions, tenants' rights to organize. So my question is, do you support these types of tenant protections?
So I definitely support the tenant's right to organize, and I am supportive of tenant support. For example, having it so that if something happens where they're unable to pay their rent, then there is support given so that the rent still gets paid. Most of our rental properties here in town are actually owned by mom and pop landlords, and so it's very hard for them to keep that property if the rent isn't being paid, because they still have a mortgage that they have to pay. And so it's important to make sure that we don't lose that rental housing stock. And also, the housing shortage in California is equal to the housing shortage in all other 49 states combined. That's the real problem. We need to do better at building more housing at all income category types and all product types to make sure that everyone has access to housing. As president of the Solano Association of Realtors, I was successful in obtaining $95,000 in first-time homebuyer grants over the last year, and it's dedicated to Solano County residents buying their very first home ever, priority given to disadvantaged communities, and 120% area median income and below. And even with that, we are realizing it is still a struggle for many to be able to afford to own their own home. If we want to talk about housing stability, making sure that people have pathways to home ownership. Even Section 8 housing has the ability to get home ownership. We just don't have a very good pipeline for creating that pathway for our residents currently. But I mean, if you think about it, life goes sideways for any of us, right? If you own your own home, you're not even late until after the 15th on your mortgage. You don't get a notice of default for 3 months. You don't get a notice of trustee sale for 6 months. If you're a tenant, you get a notice 3 days after you missed on the 1st, the 3rd day after the 1st, notice to pay rent or quit the premises. And you can be evicted 60 to 90 days later, depending on the situation. So helping people obtain homeownership is the best way to obtain housing stability. Thank you.
Thank you. I certainly support the tenants' rights to seek any and all available help from the city, from the county, and other resources. The consequences of not doing so are more detrimental to our own everyday quality of life and other costs that in terms of cleanup or in terms of other expenses. How are we going to try to get some of these federal and state level resources, or even county resources? I can think of ways when the city council, maybe in their private closed door sessions, I don't have an experience of what exactly they talk and what issues they discuss that are unknown to us, but we may have to have all our council members and mayor report quarterly or periodically to the public in terms of how many of these cases have been addressed, what exactly they have done, and what can be done, and if not, why not? I can think of one or two out-of-the-box kind of thoughts. Sister cities, we have collaboration in a small way that is hopefully expanding into larger business exchanges and helping each other out. 3 of the 7 sister cities we have, they have an they have an economic affordability that they can collaborate for a mutual purpose of training them and imparting other resources that we are good at. There are possibilities to use some of the funding and some of the models of those housing and see how we can lift our people out of this poverty situation. Thank you.
So the question focused mainly on renters, and I do fully support protections for renters, tenant associations, just cause eviction statutes, the establishment of a rental registry to track misconduct. Yes, we do have mom and pop landlords, but we also have some big landlords that are they're violating the law. And we need to enforce the ordinances we have, and we need to have a complaint system where residents can put in complaints when their landlords are violating, for example, the statewide rent control. I would rather build more housing than rely on rent control for housing affordability, but we have it at the state level. Are we enforcing it? Are our landlords abiding by it? We also need to ensure that we have enforcement of our vacant property ordinance, so we don't have residential landlords leaving buildings vacant that aren't up to code. They need to get it up to code or sell so that we can get tenants into those properties. We need support for our seniors and folks on fixed incomes. That's the fastest growing population of homeless in California is our seniors. And a lot of these folks, like I said, are on fixed incomes. We've got a lot of children that are vulnerable, so we need to address the root causes of homelessness, which is a lot of times eviction. And getting those protections in is so important. I've been a vocal advocate for a safe camping and parking site where our current unhoused can be relocated and get access to services so that we can potentially get them back into housing. And then yes, we need to build as much as quickly as possible while still going through environmental review. But we need every type of housing. We need it spread out all around the city. We need all the resources we can get from the county, state, federal to be able to build this wave of housing affordability. It's already crashing over us. We've seen how it's gentrified San Francisco and Oakland and displaced many of the communities rooted in those cities. We need to make ourselves resilient against that, and we need to build. The last thing I'll say is I also know we have many folks in the community that are supporting alternative models like community land trust, and that's something that I also really strongly support.
Thank you for the question. Can you repeat the question for me, please?
Of course. So the question is about housing and homelessness, particularly renters' rights, rent control, just cause evictions, and tenants' rights to organize. Do you support those types of tenant protections?
Yes, thank you. Yes, so rent control, I definitely support those measures and encourage everybody to definitely read more about the different propositions that's coming up on the ballot so we can all make sure that we are equally informed about what's going on here. As far as rent protections here in the city of Vallejo, my personal experience as a renter has been, I would say, somewhat positive. So in my opinion, I'd like to reach out to more community members and figure out exactly which companies are actually really doing this, because I personally rent with Crown Royalty property, and this was the first year they raised my rent in 10 years. Probably shouldn't say that in public, but you know, it happens. So when I hear these things and I hear about all these different concerns that many renters may be facing, I'm trying to figure out and get a personal first-hand view of actually what's actually transpiring in the community and actually making people homeless or leading up to homelessness. One of the things that I see as a tenant protection thing that we need to look into is more tenant equity. So if you look at Mare Island and all the new developments that's coming to Mare Island, they're looking to make about 13,000 new units in Mare Island. But how many black and brown families and how many Asian families are going to be able to move over to Mare Island in peace and get a rental property or whatever the mixed-use property will be? Because we all want to live on Mare Island. And I'm speaking for everybody because I know I do. But, you know, if I could give me a spot over there, I definitely wouldn't mind. So I think things like that need to be coming into place, more tenant protections and more equity revolving around renters and things like that as well. Thank you. But I definitely support tenant protections.
Thank you all. And so this question is for Mr. Shankar and, of course, the rest. This will actually be the last question we have of an organized nature, and then I'd like to open it up to the public. If there are questions in the audience, you can start thinking of them now, and we'll try to get a couple in before we have to depart at 7:30. So the last question from me is about economic growth and job creation. So how would you attract new businesses and industries to Vallejo while still supporting small business? And likewise, how would you promote well-paying jobs in Vallejo, particularly for underserved communities?
Thank you. The second part of the second question is a little difficult because it's too complicated. Without putting certain data and certain info, it's harder to answer. I can think of several options to help small businesses waive their initial business license fee, or some kind of an assistance in the beginning if there are totally new startups. We can think of training programs and internships like what we had at the Factory OS. By the way, I learned last week that Factory OS sold it out to somebody else. I was kind of surprised. Those internships appear to create jobs and appear to keep the trained folks in the city and continue to serve in a longer time instead of commuting 30, 40, 50 miles. We can look at collaborations with sister city programs, especially with what I saw in Ensenada twice, in 2017 and 2019. They have an environmental and a IT hub center right next to their port that has employed hundreds of young people and training them and preparing them for the next generation challenges in the IT and environmental fields. Thank you.
Right, this is an issue that's incredibly important to me as an economics professor and having done work in small business development in the past. I have been very vocal for many years now about the bad deals that Vallejo has made with developers. The reason that we have stagnation in economic development is not because we have bad developers, it's because we've made bad deals. And our elected officials and our senior city staff have negotiated deals in which developers get access to our prized assets and sometimes buy them for pennies on the dollar and have absolutely no requirements that they build, that they create jobs, or that they generate any benefit for our community. So that needs to stop. That's my first promise, that I will never support any deal that does not generate meaningful, tangible, enforceable community benefits. That's the first piece. And that's how we're gonna break the stagnation on the waterfront and on the fairgrounds and in South Vallejo and Sperry Mill. And we've sold Mare Island, but hopefully we can get at least something going on Mare Island. Small businesses, backbone of our community, we need to be more responsive to their needs. They're struggling. And everybody loves to pay lip service to small businesses. We need action to back that up. We need to be able to be out in the community talking to small businesses, and when we hear things like they're getting break-ins and getting kicked out of their insurance and paying for repairs out of pocket, we need to spring into action. The city of Vallejo got $26 million in COVID relief funds several years ago and threw them all at, I don't know where a lot of that money went. It didn't go to essential workers and it didn't go to small businesses until very recently, thanks to the vice mayor, Laura Diaz. We now finally have a grant program for small businesses. So we've got to prioritize that. And I think I'll just end. I work with young people. I work at a community college. We need pathways for our young people to be able to get into good paying jobs through the economic development projects, through the trades, whatever it may be. We need to connect employers to young people so they can continue to afford to live and hopefully own homes in the city they grew up in and they don't get displaced.
Thank you for the question. So the first part, if I got this right here, you're talking about economic growth and development. So with that, being the vice chair of the Economic Development Commission, the main pushback we hear on a constant basis when we get presenters coming up is the lack of the education system and public safety. So I don't want to be redundant, but it comes back to public safety. We would not get economic development, we would not get economic vitality until we start focusing on making this city safe again. It's that simple. It really comes down to developers and big corporations looking at Vallejo and looking at surrounding cities and saying, why would I want to play for the A's when I can play for the Giants? It's that simple. We are literally underfunded, underdeveloped, and we need help. But we need a different approach to this. And it comes with cleaning up the city, making sure that the public safety efforts are being met, executing the plan when it comes to getting action items to the dais that move the city forward rapidly. We really got to stop playing games with this. Like I'm telling you, I've been listening to city council meetings since 2018. We've been talking about this police department since 2018, probably even way before then. I've been living here since 2015. We've been talking about this for too long. We got members of council running for mayor right now that, you know, we didn't make any real efforts. We didn't make any real progress. Things didn't happen. And we cannot allow it to continue for the next 4 years or 8 years. In my vision of Vallejo, we're going to have that police department built in the next 8 years. You can guarantee it because I'm going to advocate for it with all of my heart and make sure that everybody is feeling the same way, that we need to be on the same page and moving this city forward. It comes down to public safety, guys. I don't know how much I can stress it, but economic development and growth, That's all we hear, is it's not safe. I can't raise my kids there. They can't go to school in Vallejo. That's why we're lacking. But it comes down to public safety. Thank you.
Thank you, Dwight. We adopted an economic development strategic plan back in 2013, and the number one recommendation on that was to create a business retention and expansion program, which I did in 2014. So we met with businesses, small and large, medium as well, every month to find out why they had chosen Vallejo, what was it about Vallejo that interested them and attracted them here, what businesses did they work with that perhaps don't currently exist here that would help, that maybe would benefit from being here, so we could attract, those low-hanging fruit. Also looking to find out which businesses needed to expand, because the fastest way to job creation is helping existing businesses grow locally and not losing them to a neighboring community. In 2015, one of the businesses I met with Miss Peggy Cohen-Thompson and Annette Taylor was Costco. And we learned then that they had a strong need to expand. They really wanted to expand here in Vallejo. But if they couldn't, they were going to leave. That would have been devastating for our general fund revenues. So we started working then. We had to find the space, the site, the developer, and the path forward. And that took time. But we had to be very persistent, relentlessly persistent on the goal. And we were able to get them over to the Cook property, the property that's in between Avery Green and Target. There was a PG&E pipeline that transects the property that had to be moved, and Costco financed the cost of that move at 3% interest to the city, and made sure that that is paid over time by the increase in revenues received from Costco once they open their doors. So we would not lose any revenues along the way. Those kinds of creative public-private partnerships and having that relentless, persistent focus over time is how we will get to a more vibrant economy. Creating more events like, for example, August Summer Nights. As president of Vallejo Main Street last year, we created a new event every Thursday night, downtown Vallejo, August Summer Nights. We just had the finale last week, and the current president, Alex Matias, who's here in the room, congratulations to an incredible event. That whole area downtown was packed, and it was such a good vibe. Like, everybody loved being there, and everyone was having fun. It felt safe. Bringing that foot traffic and increasing that perception and reality of safety is how you increase business in our downtown. Doing that all over town, creating more events and more opportunities for people to come, enjoy the community, and feel safe and shop in our areas is how we create more commerce.
That's time. Thank you. So I would like to open it up to questions from the audience, if there are any. If you have one, please raise your hand. Run one right here, and if you could actually come over, and I'll give you my microphone. Okay. And hopefully it's a question that everybody in the seats can answer.
I'll be quick. My name's Deanna. Hi. Could I just get each of you to briefly answer if you would be in support of a vacant property ordinance for the downtown businesses, for bottom floor and all the apartments above, something that had meaningful teeth. We couldn't just let somebody take a permit out and let that expire and take another permit out 10 years. Okay, who's for creating something meaningful with teeth for the downtown?
I would be supportive of that, and also having an incentive, right? Because a lot of the property owners downtown, the individual property owners, they don't have the funding to sprinkler the whole building and do the seismic retrofit and the ADA requirements that are involved in necessary for them to do to have the building occupied. So we need to have that strategy that I mentioned earlier, where we have a certain timeline, specific strategy dedicated to if you pull permits to have housing above ground, because housing is essential to have vibrancy in your downtown, and make the bottom floor available for commercial retail, mixed use. Then you will waive connection fees, waive rebate, permit fees, and rebate property taxes for a short period of time. And if you do not execute those permits within that period of time, you have to pay those fees. And I know we will see change happen if we do that strategy. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the question, Diana. Definitely, I propose supporting it, but we may need a collective support of all the council members and also the Downtown Merchant Association and the small business owners that are not members of the Downtown Merchant Association, because that seems to have already divided them into two camps, and I see complaints flying from one to the other year after year. So that needs to change a little bit. Thank you.
I do support a vacant property ordinance downtown, and it's part of my platform on my website. I think it's a key cause of the stagnation downtown. You just can't revitalize and activate downtown Vallejo with the number of vacant buildings that we have that aren't up to code. And when you have buildings with, that have had scaffolding up since the Napa earthquake, that's just never gonna activate. The good news is we have an example in our neighboring city, Martinez. Martinez had a change of leadership. They staffed up their planning department. They put in a vacant property ordinance. They started enforcing it. And if anyone's been to downtown Martinez in the last couple of years, they have revitalized their downtown. And their downtown isn't nearly as nice as Vallejo's downtown. It doesn't have nearly as many assets as Vallejo's downtown, which means we very much can, with that simple policy change, get folks into those vacant spaces, because it doesn't matter how many people we put down there or events or things like that. If those buildings stay vacant, we're losing out. So yeah, get your building up to code or sell, put that ordinance in place, and let's get to work. Let's get some businesses in those spaces.
Thank you for the question, Ms. Lang. So vacant property ordinance, definitely. We need to have something that is not biased, that is for the people, that's going to represent the city of Vallejo. One of the things that I've learned is that people are a little too friendly with some of these more higher end property owners here in the city of Vallejo, which has created this leniency or this leniency of actually enforcing what needs to happen here in the city of Vallejo. Of course, there was some controversy regarding one of the vacant buildings just recently with a school trying to come downtown. That was not approved by council, but I think efforts are coming to the face of Vallejoans where we are trying to fill these buildings, and we definitely need the prior owners to either sell or get that building up to code. But I speak with a lot of business owners. I know a lot of business owners in the downtown area, and one of the main things that they emphasize to me is the cost of permitting and different costs that the city puts on them for them to actually move forward with any sort of progress. So I think we got to look at it and look in the mirror and actually, really look at the facts. And when you're talking to these business owners, ask them the hard questions. Ask them, well, how much are they asking? Because I've heard crazy numbers, 200,000, 300,000. There's a lot on my corner on Kentucky and Napa. It's been sold for like 3 or 4 years now. It's supposed to be a housing development. We haven't seen anything. They come cut the yard every 6 months or whatever like that. But it's just prolonging the issue. So we really need to make sure we're looking at all facets of this when we're talking about it and figure out what benefits does it have for the property owners to even make business here in Vallejo, or how easy is it for them, instead of just criticizing and say, hey, you guys need to get your building, when you don't even have the $300,000 to get your building together. So we got to make sure that we holding each other accountable and looking at it in a realist view, quite honestly, because I know we all have homes that probably need some work as well, and we just got to look at the problem as a real condition. And when we try to get something built in downtown or move to downtown, stop saying no to everything. Some things we got to let it play out and see how it happens and see how it works out, because we keep complaining about vacant properties, but we also turning down property opportunities as well. So we got to start looking each other in the mirror. Thank you.
In order for me I have to be out here by 8 o'clock. So in order for us to get a few more people in here, 1 minute for your question, 1 minute for you guys, so that folks will be able to get some questions in line. Quarter of, I gotta get up out of here. Okay, Councilmember Diaz.
So I'm actually the vice mayor, for those that don't know me. I'm Andrea Sorce. My question is very simple. Can't hear you.
My question is very simple. We've talked about the commissions and how important commissions are, and sometimes people leave because they feel not valued. When I came on board, some of the commissions, and I'll use the Economic Vitality Commission as an example. The Economic Vitality Commission had a $400 a year budget for being one of the #1 things that's important in Vallejo. They met every other month, and they weren't able to present to council. So what I want to hear from you guys is, are you willing to allow commissions to do what I did with Economic Vitality, where they come and present to council, where they meet every month, and they're able to talk to you directly without having to go through staff?
1 minute.
Of course we support it. People love it because serving in 2 commissions and several other nonprofit boards, I will have to say that because people don't feel honored, not only for their ideas, but also sort of a contempt and a bias. A lot of times it's a question of both the trust and what will come out of it, of the goodwill. So I strongly support it. Thank you.
Yeah, I support this as well. I chair a city commission. Most of what I do is fighting the bureaucratic processes, probably about 80-85%, and the remaining 15 or 20% of my time is spent actually doing the work of the commission. We have a request for meetings that's been pending since July 2022 and still hasn't been granted, and the first decision we made, we were overruled by Council 7-0. So what message does that send to the community? I can also say firsthand that the time we did present to council when we were overruled, we were told by the city attorney's office that we needed to read off of a script that was approved by the entire board, and we sat there and wrote a script. That wasn't necessary. So I fully support chairs and commission members being able to regularly present to city council. I'll lead that and monitor that out of the mayor's office with the council agendas. I'll work with the commission chairs and make sure that we make that happen.
Thank you for the question, Vice Mayor. Yes, I fully support the commissions being more vocal and more accountable to the city. There are quite a few economic development commissioners in the room right now. I see Mr. Calvin Harrell come in. Our former chair, Alex Matias, is right there. Thomas Barbiero is right here as well. So we are a very active commission, and we appreciate the support that Vice Mayor brought to the commission, because like she mentioned, we had a $400 budget. It's been now upgraded and approved. And also another thing that we fought for was representation. We would be walking into businesses without a name tag or any sort of representation explaining, hey, I'm from the Economic Development Commission, I'm Dwight Monroe Jr. And they're looking at us like, who are you? So representation matters. And when commissions and chairs are empowered to do more work in the city, it just creates an overall better sense of community, quite honestly. So getting that commission budget from $400 to, I believe, a few $1,000s has really elevated the status of the Economic Development Commission. We also got our meetings changed as well. So we're just trying to be more effective with everything we do. Thank you.
Thanks, Dwight. Yeah, absolutely. As I mentioned in one of my answers earlier, I'd actually like to see the chairs and vice chairs of the commissions involved in the goal-setting process, as well as community leaders from around our community. Because when we have that united vision on what we are going towards and striving for, we actually will get there faster. Having them also report back quarterly what their work product is in regards to achieving those goals and what their part is in that achievement, I think is incredibly valuable to the council to make sure that we're all staying on track. Thank you.
Okay, Michelle, and then Mario, and then we'll come over to this side.
I have a question for y'all about our unhoused. What are we going to do with, we're playing whack-a-mole. You know, we move them, and then we hit them, and we move them again. We need something permanent. We need to do something that isn't costing us money every time we have to move them. So what are your ideas on how to make this different and give our unhoused kind of a place to be?
Thank you, Michelle. For this 1 hour answer question, I'm going to just mention a couple of things. We can join hands with, for starters, we can join hands with people like Joey Carrizales, Michelle and Zenit, and Eli Smith, and Damien Nash, and Didi, and many other activists who are actively doing something about it every day, no matter what the city does or doesn't, or no matter what budget is available. We have other things, simple things that we can do. Some of us have done it, and this is not a place to brag, but I have taken 1 or 2 people to go shower in my place, sit and have lunch with them, or give them a ride someplace they need to go, or for medical advice. For any other details, I can tell stories, believe me. Come and talk to me afterwards. Thank you.
Yeah, I mentioned earlier the safe camping parking zone. The whack-a-mole it's not only inhumane, but it's a waste of resources, and it doesn't matter what the Supreme Court did or didn't do. If you sweep encampments and you don't give people a place to go, they're going to be forced to move somewhere else in the city, and you're just going to have to sweep them again. And it's just a black hole for our finances. And I believe you judge a society by how it treats its most vulnerable. So that just to me is a non-starter. What's worked in other cities is designating a site where people can be safely relocated and get the support that they need with sanitation, showers, lockers, dumpsters, etc. And that is something that's been proposed by the vice mayor and rejected by our city attorney's office, despite having been done in many other cities around the Bay Area to great success. So again, this is where we've got to stop making excuses and really push and go to those other cities and figure out what happened and say, look, this isn't a can we do this, this is a do this. Figure out how to do this and do it ASAP, because the way that we've handled this unhoused crisis in Vallejo, it's an embarrassment for our community. And the amount of waste, I know I only have a minute, the amount of waste on these housing projects. Sacramento Street, $2.5 million had to be paid back to the feds. The Broadway project, triple budget. It was supposed to be $9 million, now it's $27. There's still a funding gap. The city had to get a lien on the property because we were stiffing in our contractors. The Navigation Center still has a funding gap. The mismanagement and the waste also has to stop, because nobody's winning. Nobody looks at this situation in Vallejo and says, yeah, let's keep doing that. We've got to do things differently.
Yes, thank you for that question, Ms. Michelle. So the housing community, of course, we got to get the Navigation Center built. And we got to stop with the mismanaging of the funds. And we got to make sure that we got this money really earmarked and really ready to deliver the promises that have been, and which has been the Navigation Center for about the past 2 years now. They broke ground, thank God, but we need to finish the job. We need to really think about executing the plan and really finishing the job. We do a lot of planning around here, but we're not executing. And that's what's really plaguing us and really bothering this community, and really quite honestly bothering me. The nonprofits do so much work in this city that the city don't even care. They pretty much just let the nonprofits do the work, and then they come in and take the credit. I'm just being honest. We gotta help who want help. That really is something that I've seen when I speak to the unhoused. We gotta help who wants help. If they put their hand out, we put our hand out. But if they're not putting their hand out, we can't really do too much. And that's just being honest. Cleanups. I'm always involved in a cleanup. I probably did over 100 cleanups in the city of Vallejo. We, Angels of Heart Nonprofit Board President, we feed the unhoused community right here once a week. Also churches, they have to be involved. Churches in the religious community have to be more involved with taking care of the unhoused community. It's out the goodness of their heart. They need to provide showers, assistance, resources. This is all in the name of Jesus. I'm not even lying to you, but it needs to happen. We need to rely on our nonprofits in our community and our religious community to really make sure that we're elevating the status and helping these folks get the right resources they need. Thank you.
Thank you. So we need to have more creative solutions. We do need to have solutions. We need to be solutions focused, and we need to have more creative solutions. So I was actually contacted last year by a private property owner that owns several mobile home parks locally and also in other areas of the region, and they are working with other counties to help move folks out of encampments, off of the streets and into stable housing, and working with nonprofit providers to provide mental health supports, substance abuse counseling, career development training so that they are able to achieve their full potential. And I connected that Vallejo property owner with the county last year, and just over the last 7 or 8 months, they have moved a little over 100 folks out of encampments and into not permanent, but stable housing. Mobile homes are not considered permanent because they're not on a foundation, although I have clients that buy them for permanent housing, but that's neither here nor there. But so they were successful in getting them housed, getting them resources, and some of those folks have even successfully transitioned into independent living on their own. And we need to do a better job of collaborating with our nonprofit providers that have the relationships with the individuals and our county and city governments, so that all of those resources can be made available, and that there is that collaboration and warm handoff to make sure that our folks are getting the help that they need and deserve. And we need to make sure we have a regional partnership, because, for example, when San Francisco cleared encampments for the APEX convention, we saw an increase in the unhoused population downtown. And one of the security guards, questioned some of them, like, tell me, where are you from, whatnot. And it turned out that there was a nonprofit provider in San Francisco that came behind the city after they noticed all of the individuals, and very well intentioned, I'm sure, but gave them Clipper cards so that they had the ability to go somewhere. Well, Clipper cards work on the ferry, and so they ended up here. But you have to have that regional partnership to make sure that we aren't pushing off our problems on someone else, and that no one else is pushing their problems off on us, that we are working together to make sure that we have a cohesive response, solution-oriented response. Thank you.
Okay, Mario? It's not going to go but so far.
Gentleman had a question over here. I already explained. I got this.
Hello, everybody. Okay, most of you know who I am. The ones that you don't know me, my name is Mario Saucedo. I am been in the Solano County for the last 22 years, serving the community of Solano County with my nonprofit, Solano ACE Coalition. Since I moved here, I've been passing 5 mayors, so many city councils, so many county supervisors, and everyone that come along and come with a promise. What is your real promise? Because me as a nonprofit, providing the services that you should provide to our communities, to build healthy communities, you let everything in my organization that is have no money, that has been working just with our volunteers, that they've been working with the Solano ACE Coalition for 20 years. I also bring cultural awareness to this community. For the last 10 years, I've been bringing to this county very successful events, such as Cinco de Mayo, Fiestas Patrias, and Dia de los Muertos. Dia de los Muertos is one of the biggest ones, and which I'm one of the designers of all the events. This event brings economical growth and cultural awareness to the community of Vallejo for the last 10 years, and the city. Finally, for the first year, they grant me, after so many fights, and me asking Mina and Ariola and the mayor to help me, because I was unable to provide to my community the education and the prevention and the cultural awareness that we need in this community, because we are the most diverse community in the United States. So you guys lead me along with all this job that is required resources and money to be able to create something better. I hear Pippin talking about such a wonderful event about August 9th. It's just an event that just appeared last year. I've been in this community for 20 years, providing. And you guys have the resources, I don't. So why not helping people that have been here in this community for so many years, providing to our community with no gain because we are not getting a paycheck. For a change, can you guys do something about this?
Thank you, Mario, for that very stirring question. It's very authentic, and having known you for 21 years and having been a supporter and having seen firsthand some of the discrimination and bias that their group faced over the years, I cannot promise anything, but in the first month of being mayor, I will bring you and your entity into a dialogue with the city manager and the entire council for an evaluation to look at what is something that we can do and then go from there. I would also outreach and work with you on getting the message out to all the other nonprofits that support, because together only we survive. Thank you.
Thanks, Mario. I was speaking earlier about there being special treatment, special interest getting special treatment in respect to permits and other things of the city. I think that's happened with event funding as well. And we've heard a lot of lip service to the diversity of the community and the need for, and the value on these cultural activities. And yet we don't see any transparency with how the city allocates funding. And that's not okay. I've heard the hurt from many different communities, not just yourself with some of the events you're putting on, but the powwow. The indigenous community, the powwow, had to move to Fairfield because they couldn't work with the city of Vallejo on the waterfront. Pistis-Sinayan, it's going really well on Mare Island, but that wasn't their choice. That was by force because the city wasn't doing what they needed for the waterfront. So certain entities and certain events get the ability to have, support downtown and get financial support from the city, and others don't. And it needs to be equitable across the board. We have to be transparent. There needs to be application processes, there needs to be transparent selection processes. If we're going to give public funds to these events, which are important, everybody needs to be involved, and it needs to be an open book.
Thank you for that question. Yeah, so my promise, I don't have any promises. Quite honestly, I'm going up there to execute. I think it's something that's plagued politicians or public service for a long time. Getting up here and talking about, I'm gonna promise this, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. You don't even know what the job is yet. We need to get in the job first. Then we can get our visual, get our eyes on it, get our hands on it. Then we actually know what kind of beast we're dealing with, because these council members have told me already, Dwight, this is gonna drain you. What are you doing? This is not what you think. So we gotta get in there, see what we actually dealing with, see what we're working with, and then we can start talking to the community about promises and different things like that. But just knowing, and I encourage you to speak to any board members or commissioners that have served with me. I'm coming in there to represent Vallejo, represent the best interests of the Vallejo residents, the community members. Thank you. And the main thing is, we gotta execute. That's the promise, is executing, and stop just planning. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Mario. And your events are so amazing and legendary and have been such a blessing to our community. And I recognize the struggles of all nonprofit providers, right, to get funding. And so, these kind of legacy events do deserve to have support from the city for sure. And also, we need to look at how we can grow that fund, because the foundation giving in Solano County is horrible. It's like pennies on the dollar compared to San Francisco that gets over $1,000 per capita in foundation giving. So we've been, there's several organizations that are doing the work of building that nonprofit capacity, looking at how we can increase funding and grow the ability for grant funding for different nonprofit providers. So So I look forward to having more of those kinds of conversations and workshops to help have that capacity building done with our nonprofit providers that are so valuable to our community. Thank you.
Okay, there's a gentleman over here that had a question. Gentleman had a question. Sorry, I only go to the sofa.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Emmanuel Andreas. I'm resident in Vallejo.
It's on.
Oh, closer, okay. Good evening. My name is Emmanuel Andreas. I'm resident here in Vallejo. First and foremost, what I would like to say is that I think your courage, your interest was for planning, serving the folks here in Vallejo, and it's very challenging time. I wouldn't do it, but you guys doing this, I thank you for your courage. Secondly, despite the 30 years economic development in the west side of the city, in Mare Island, that's all we hear. We don't hear anything about the downtown development or other development, except all these houses on the east side of Vallejo development. We don't hear anything about businesses coming, small businesses, or the city giving incentive or marketing strategy in bringing investors here in the city. That's what we need. Now, what I call the economic situation of Vallejo is, in economics term, would be called, let's say, economic stagnation. What it means is basically, I don't have to define it to you, but what it means is we hear all these promises. At the same time, I have sort of like measuring stick, where I see the development. Yet, after 20-some years, the educational system is inferior, it needs improvement, the public safety, we talk about crime, has not changed. And also unemployment is very high in the city. So specifically, I would like the gentle lady and gentlemen would like to ask is, we hear about you guys support businesses, right? Small business and whatnot. What I would like to hear specifically, in increment. First year, I would like to do this. Specific, not just, I supported businesses and all of a sudden, they've been doing like this for 20 years. Now, additional strategy. What is your additional strategy, despite the current council members and the mayor are doing it, in addition to what they do? And I appreciate your service as well, Mrs. Vice Mayor. Thank you.
Now, it's 8:45, so we have a strict 1 minute, and then we have to shut this down.
Thank you for your question, sir. So as the Economic Development Commissioner, one of the main things that we have is the Shop Local campaign. So we're always trying to emphasize people to shop local, because that is what actually is driving economic development here in the city, is people actually supporting Vallejo and not going to neighboring cities like American Canyon or Benicia, but really supporting Vallejo. From the morning you wake up, getting some coffee at Moschetti's or the Grind or wherever, go get some lunch. I don't care if you get it from a local taco truck. What you're doing is really supporting Vallejo, and it's going back to a family that cares about this community. So it's just kind of like a revolving circle. But specific plans, we need to make sure that we're getting more grants to the community, like the business hardening grant that just came out, which I advocated for last September. And obviously the community members were listening. So things like that, getting more grants to the community, give business owners better opportunities to renovate or innovate their business. That's what's going to lead to more success and more small businesses coming to Vallejo. Thank you.
Thank you. So, enhanced infrastructure financing districts for our waterfront and downtown, a strategic economic incentive program specifically targeting our downtown. advocating for, we just had a report from STA about passenger rail, and we are the largest city in the Bay Area that does not have passenger rail. And there is a proposal for us to connect with Napa Valley Junction on the SMART train. Having that connection at our ferry terminal to Napa and San Francisco will definitely increase our tourism ability, and it also unlocks federal and state dollars for multimodal, transit-oriented, high-density, mixed-use residential, mixed-use development. And lastly, one priority I haven't been able to touch on, but it is deeply important to me, is our youth. Supporting our youth from cradle to career, inspiring them to realize their full potential and be engaged and involved in our community all along the way is the best way to make sure that our community is vibrant and thriving for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. The city of Vallejo's vision says safety, prosperity, and vibrancy for all, our vibrant city. And I was thinking about it for several years. Every time I read it, they haven't amended much to it. And I came up with something similar to resonate that I experienced with the people, with the activists, with the business owners, with the youth, and all the volunteers. And that is protect, preserve, prosper, Vallejo for all. I repeat that twice because it's something like you and me. First one is for me, other one is for all of you. For more detailed, specific issues or specific solutions, Emmanuel, I'll be happy to talk with you or post some details on the website. Thank you.
So I want to build off of the answer I gave earlier. Obviously, I think one reason for the stagnation is the bad deals we made with developers, these land deals, again, where you just get outsiders extracting and they don't actually have to create jobs or build anything. So, putting a stop to that and, getting away from lip service to small businesses and actually getting down to work. So the job that I had immediately before starting my teaching career at DVC was running economic empowerment programming for refugees and immigrants, and I ran a microenterprise program that provided not just business advising, but startup capital. We ran a lending institution that helped with the creation and expansion of hundreds of refugee and immigrant and low-income owned small businesses, and we partnered with other agencies to make sure that businesses of all sizes had access to resources. Now, Solano County doesn't have the infrastructure of resources, but I think it's really important out of the city, out of the Economic Development Department, maybe through the Economic Development Commission or through the mayor's office, to have a resource portal where business owners can come and get the latest information on what grants are available from the city, the county, the state, the federal, for expansion, for facade improvements. There's all sorts of funding out there, and I think we need to give support to businesses and give that access, and especially for our businesses that aren't downtown, our businesses that are minority owned, our businesses that are immigrant owned, our businesses that aren't part of the chamber. We need to make sure we're going out to them and getting them access to those resources too.
So we don't have time for any more questions. I want to thank everybody for coming out. And what's important is that you get out there and vote and bring other people along with you.